ahead and start. I love rotten food, or more specifically, I love that fine line between fresh and rotten. It's that zone of controlled rot called fermentation. And I'm talking about fermented foods such as sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, kombucha, coffee, chocolate. So many foods that people consume on a regular basis are foods that people don't always think about as being fermented, but I think about these kind of things a lot. And if you're not familiar with fermentation, when it comes to food, I'm talking about a microbial transformation of food. I'm talking about things like bacteria, yeast, and sometimes mold in food. When that is there, when those things mix, that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. I love the taste of fermented food. Some of the most unique and delicious flavors come from fermented food. I also love making and learning new ways to make these traditional ferments and then sharing them with other people. One of my favorite fermented genres is heirloom yogurts. And heirloom yogurts are a little different than the traditional or the commercial yogurt that's available. Traditional yogurts are made with a backslopping method, taking a spoonful or so of a previous batch of yogurt and putting that in a new batch of yogurt. And that's a little different than how it's made commercially with a freeze-dried culture that is then creates a consistent product, and a new freeze-dried culture is used every time. But this is Viili. This is an heirloom yogurt from Finland. You saw how it was stretching there. It's like Elmer's glue or Nickelodeon Gak, if you're familiar with that old toy. And I love the taste and the texture of that. My wife, she can't stand it. She says it's like snot in her mouth. But if you can get over that texture, or if you like it like I do, then I urge everyone to try Viili because it's delicious and it's amazing. And it's connected to a culture, a history, a past. And like so many fermented foods, the oldest known Viili culture in the United States is available from Gem Cultures. It was brought over in the early 1900s. It's the oldest publicly known and available, at least. And it was brought over by ship, dehydrated on a handkerchief. And it was kept alive and put into milk, kept alive by 14 children from the original people that brought it over. Those 14 children had grandchildren, and one of them turned it into a company. It's a great Viili. It's delicious. It has that was that first image that I showed you. But I was in search of a Viili that was even, some would say probably more disgusting. It had that like ropey texture, but I was looking for something that had a mold that would grow on top, a little white fuzzy mold, which might sound gross, but it's the same kind of mold that grows on camembert cheese. So it's delicious. It adds complexity of flavor, and I wanted to try it. I'd only seen images of it. I'd only read descriptions of it, and I spent about a year trying to find this Viili. I didn't know if it would have survived on any handkerchiefs coming over in the early 1900s. I didn't know if it was still available in the United States. Sometimes these things can be kind of difficult to get through customs nowadays. And I eventually found that the oldest population, or the largest population of Finnish Americans lives in the UP and an old mining region. And I eventually, through connections, found that someone was still making a traditional Viili that had a mold growing on it. It's a very fine mold, but it's still a mold, and it still does change the flavor. But it took a long time to find, and I'm kind of weird, and I'm willing to spend the time to do that, to search out these exotic cultures that have history, that have traditions, but not everyone's willing to do that. But the important thing is that these things, I feel, need to be kept alive, and they will die if people don't keep backslopping them, putting them into new fresh milk. Even in Finland, fewer people are making things like this Viili traditional ways. They're getting it at the supermarket, like so many places, like South Korea with kimchi. It's much easier to purchase in the store, even though there's a huge tradition around making that with entire families. And so for myself, the microbes don't really need us. I mean, they were around long before us and will be long after. This is that Viili that I was searching for, by the way. You can't see the mold, but you can see again that ropey sliminess. It's just delicious, trust me. But it's important, I feel, to not forget about these things. This cheese doesn't have anything to do with yogurt, but it's another fermented product, and this is a product that I forgot about. You'll see in the last slide that it molded in a bad way, the bad kind of mold. And it's the same way with these kinds of ferments. If we just forget about them, they could be lost. And I urge everyone to connect to these food cultures, to connect to these weird things that have long history and tradition, and continue to ferment them because future generations might really enjoy something, even if you think it's a little weird. Thank you.